Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this week's video, I'm going to show you guys my final architecture project for my master's degree. So without further ado, let's get into it. So as you guys can see, the title of my project is Resurgence of the Piave, the Hydrocultural Centre of the Piave. And this was such a challenging project at the start, but as we go on, we can obviously see the development that it went through. So I've got the contents page, the narrative, editorial, site analysis, how a river breathes, design conceptualization, particle simulation, some precedents, project development, some more precedents, and concept progression, proposal testing, scheme progression, materials, and then the drawings, just the site plan, the short section, long section, all the elevations, health and safety, fire and accessibility for RIBA and ARB criteria, environmental strategies and sustainability, technical and structural principles, the landscape engineering, aerial atmospherics, perspectives, and the final kind of collage render I did of the true impact. So we'll see what that is at the end of the video. So to start with, the narrative of the project, I'm going to read it. I've already read it in previous videos, but I'm going to read it again because it's really crucial. So it's the objective of my scheme is to bring fresh water and sediment from the river Sile into the lagoon. The condition of the lagoon and the health of the ecosystems depends on the influx of sediment and fresh water. Therefore, it is crucial to design a highly sophisticated and well-orchestrated architectural scheme to perform these actions. The client for the project are the citizens of Venice, to bring the Venetian people together to work on conserving and restoring their lagoon. The clients also extend to fish farmers that live and work on the lagoon. The designated site is within the Venice Lagoon near the village of Capocile in the municipality of San Donna de Piave, with the river Sile bordering the land and the lagoon. In order to combat the rise in sea level, it's time for the profession to create interventions which respond to climate change threats. My project aims to incorporate a combination of landscape engineering and technology to create an architectural intervention that meets the needs of the clients and, most importantly, the health of the lagoon. So it's an architectural rehabilitation intervention that will restore the ecosystem of the Venice Lagoon. And I'm going to try and make this video quite quick. Not really quick, I'm not gonna skip past it, but I'm not gonna go into detail of every page. You can pause it and read some of the pages that I've got. I think we had a limit of 40 sheets for the final kind of portfolio, and this is 40 sheets altogether. So I'm gonna go through that and hopefully you guys enjoy it. So to start with, things that you've seen before is kind of the newspaper articles that's kind of surrounding Venice, surrounding the lagoon, and in particular kind of the dangers of flood and the risk of flood that Venice has. And I wrote down that by examining newspaper articles, it's been brought to my attention that there's a serious scope on this project to produce a scheme that works to confront the challenges posed by the rising sea levels, a distressed and nutrient depleted lagoon, and how the benefits of human and nature connection can lead to greater and longer sustainable growth for the people of Venice. Some site analysis, choosing where the best site is for this project, and after identifying that this is where the river comes and meets towards the lagoon, and it's bringing all of that fresh water, all of the sediment from higher up to lower ground. Now this is the optimal zone to bring in that sediment and that fresh water to kind of replenish and restore the ecosystems within the Venice Lagoon, identifying some of the agriculture and aquaculture, the water filtration processes that go on, and an elevation profile of Capocile along the river Sile. Some initial site analysis, a combination of both kind of primary from myself, looking at some of the information online about Capocile. In addition to that, the information that we were given from Dr. Camilla Bertolini, who was a guest kind of lecturer in our studio, who gave a presentation on the research that she's been conducting of the lagoon. And it was very interesting, and there's so much information to just kind of filter out and take what I needed. I mean, effectively I needed all of it, but to be specific to kind of my project and my aims, I kind of took the Lagoon of Venice is in rapid evolution, kind of the stats from that, and the challenge of the bathymetry in the Venice Lagoon as well. Pictures of my site model, the physical site model that I created, and some additional smaller models that you've seen me make in previous videos. And final kind of summarizing this page up by some landscape engineering techniques, the weirs, sediment pools, fish ladders that I've been using and integrating in the scheme that you'll see, and the long-term ambitions of the chosen site, which is to create an architectural intervention that improves the health of the lagoon, work with the landscape to produce a scheme that meets the future needs of Venice, design to protect and conserve the ecosystems within the Venice Lagoon, integrate the architectural outcome with the existing site to emulate the delicacy and fragility of the lagoon, and finally to produce a design that acts as a manifesto for how design should respond to current and future climate threats. And I wanted to create this page of how a river breathes, and is kind of coming together, kind of a merge of lots of different information that I previously studied, including obviously the site itself, sediment particle simulation, the history of the site, the Piave as a greenfield site, technical exploration of the Piave, and like I said, the river restoration techniques, which I went into greater depth, and there's more pages on that in my design diary, but just for the sake of the portfolio, narrowing it down into much more concise kind of points. And how a river breathes, and that this kind of not famous but kind of infamous in my project, that rivers are surprisingly a large source of greenhouse gases, and water pollution makes their emissions many times worse. So using that statistic to drive the project into how kind of the scheme is very much centered around water. Effectively, it's crazy how we've gone from producing a scheme for people to producing a scheme for the landscape that then meets the needs of the people. And by putting landscape first, the effect from that is greater, and the benefits of that for the site, and effectively, as it says, using the project as a manifesto for future schemes as well, globally. Design conceptualization, the strategic master plan AXO I did, not really AXO, but like kind of the AXO type diagram of kind of extrapolating the data, identifying zones within the river, what they mean, what it means for my project, creating a collage in the Matthew Rangel style, theoretical collages I did earlier on in the project, and of course the one on the right that you can see, this is the key figure, this is the key image, the key diagram illustration that I created, that the project was kind of born from, to be honest. And as it says at the bottom, sorry, think global, act local. This is a time in architecture, this is a time in our world that we need to be working in this way, and we cannot be kind of, in recent years, recent decades, we have seen the kind of this copy-paste culture within housing, this copy-paste culture in architecture. We need to be braver, we need to be putting our ideas out there, and this kind of notion of multidisciplinary and collaboration needs to be stronger, and it needs to work in the best way possible to produce benefits for the world. And as we think globally, and how we can kind of bring sustainability, how we can bring all these different factors together, especially when it comes to construction as well, the choice of materials, the choice of techniques in order to build the buildings, we need to have lots of these mini kind of projects going along all around the world that work together kind of in a way. Yeah. Particle simulation, you've already seen me kind of discuss this in previous videos, and that process, and how that also led on to the factor of sediment flow and sediment pools, which are going to be important for my project. And it's all about kind of the process the water goes through, and not only the process the water goes through, but the tool that water is in this project in order to bring that sediment. It's acting as a kind of a figure of transport and a figure of connection between, yes, land and water, but it's a connection between the current state of the lagoon and the future health of the lagoon. And this sediment is coming to replenish the lagoon, and it's so important that I find a way, or that earlier on in the process, that I found a way in order to extract and bring in the sediment, bring in the fresh water, and then architecturally, how can I articulate this into a building, and what does that mean not only for the people but for the site as well. Undertaking some precedent studies, initial precedent studies of AMIT 09, the projects that they've been conducting at their firm, I think is quite extraordinary, and really trying to look at these three separate projects from a couple of different angles. Firstly, being as artistic and aesthetics, into, okay, how is this working? How is it actually relevant to the site? And what are the architects trying to kind of convey? And secondly, scientifically breaking apart, technologically breaking apart these projects. How are they being embedded in the site? How do they work? What is kind of the formula, the equations that are going on in order for these to operate effectively? And what can I take from that can benefit my project moving forward? Further development, looking at kind of the work of artists, looking at the work of sculptors, kind of conducting then my own investigation into how I can be visualizing some of these spaces, as you can see. on the right hand side. And then again, experimenting through layers. This was such a long process within the project. Testing, trialing, put these layers on top of each other. What do they mean? What does this convey? And what is it about this information that is truly going to be benefiting the scheme as a whole? And once you understand that, kind of by not limiting myself in the earlier stages, I think this led to greater kind of creative flow and creative growth. And creative growth also led into the scientific kind of elements that I then explored later on in the project, and later on throughout the year, that then led to kind of all of these different aspects, all of these different elements culminating into one scheme that kind of works, in my opinion, quite cohesively. The programs, we have the lobby, the cafe space, research center, museum of flooding, education hub, auditorium, and the fish farmer settlements, and the landscape aspects of this project being the weirs, the sediment pools, and the fish ladder, that are all going to be working in harmony together to effectively work as the manifesto of my project, and to kind of complete the ambitions and the aims of my project, which were to restore the health of the ecosystems within the Venice Lagoon. And I'm trying to do some kind of abstract plan and section adjacency diagrams earlier on to identify these zones. And once a form was kind of created, then I used it to kind of slice through and look at the volumes in different ways, analyze them. What does it mean? Spatial organization kind of diagrams, using the Rhino model to look at the form, and how can I kind of cut this up. And I created, as you can see, the volumetric, the sushi section, as I called it. And this was another kind of key point in the project. Yes, I didn't go with this form, as you'll see in the next slides, but by cutting up the volume, this then led to another factor, which was kind of a breakthrough point. Let me just quickly see if it's on the next. Okay, kind of, yeah. But let me just quickly say before I move on to the LV Foundation, by breaking up this volume and seeing it in different segments, my tutor then had a discussion with me to be like, you know what, now is the time that you have to think much more pragmatically. And what he means by that is designing spaces that aren't going to be structurally complicated to construct. And of course, the limited time we have in architecture school to design as well. So think of the spaces much more pragmatically, but think of maybe possibly the envelope of how this is going to be delicately wrapped, that you could then kind of bring in back these notions of fragility, delicacy, etc. And this was such a, I don't want to keep saying like a breakthrough, but like it really was a key part of my project, the LV Foundation. The way that Gary designed this incredible building, in all honesty, I took for granted. I took for granted the first time I ever saw this building, and the first time that I truly kind of was exposed to the drawings. I mean, I was exposed to the drawings years ago, but studying them this year for this project, a completely different level. I mean, the way that the project has been engineered is truly out of this world. Using the building as one huge, large foundation, which then inhabits everything else, and is then not covered but wrapped and dressed in this envelope that is so beautiful, is mind-blowing. And the way that he was able to do this alongside his team and alongside the engineers is through the diagram that you see on the right hand side, breaking it down into steps, into stage 1, where we have the concrete forms, and we see that these are the actual spaces, these are the programs that have been designed and constructed. Stage 2 shows the icebergs, and what he means by icebergs is the structural support elements that go around the building that become a part of the form, yet they are not spaces that people can go into, use, see, etc. They are literally there as structural support elements. And it's crazy because you can trick and you can create an illusion through architecture, and that is exactly what he has done. Stage 3, we can see the structural support elements through the timber glulam beams and the steel poles that he's used to create the structural support elements for the envelope. And stage 4, of course, is the envelope itself. And once we see the whole project in its entirety, it's truly remarkable. And I would love to visit the LV Foundation very, very soon. I mean, it's in Paris, so it's only a quick flight away. But now that I've actually investigated into how this building was constructed, I think the experience I'm going to have actually being there is going to be completely different, very, very special, and I can't wait. So yeah. And then this led to kind of the concept progression. You know, the concept progression, what's meant by that is much more development, sketching, going back to the earlier forms of the volumes that I broke up, deconstructing those, as you can see, the initial plans that I created, working on those plans, looking at it from a completely different kind of perspective through section mode. And then of course some quick illustrations. There's more in the design diary, but keeping it concise for now for this presentation, into the structure and how it was put together, and how I can then emulate factors of Gary's LV foundation to best suit the needs of my project. And this led to the proposal testing. You can see the iterative process that has gone through from the concrete blocks. We see the icebergs being constructed, and much more of this was that a lot of time was given towards the wrapping of the envelope, and how this is then going to work in kind of harmony with the landscape kind of engineering aspect of the scheme that I've been introducing to. This took a long while. This took quite the journey, back and forth, and some very, very long days, some very, very long nights, but we got it done. And as you'll see in the final kind of images and renders, I am pleased with the outcome of the project, and introducing the bridge as another form of entrance to the scheme. Kind of, I think, is just the kind of how do I say it? I'll just say the cherry on top, in a way, the cherry on top. And yeah, the scheme, again, scheme progression, proposal testing, scheme progression, again, seeing the site, the concrete blocks, the structural support elements, structure for the envelope, and then the introduction of the bridge, that the users and visitors can enter at 2 different levels. Same experience, but obviously if you want to start on the ground, on the ground slab, you can. You don't have to go directly straight into the lobby. And it also provides an alternative route of entrance and exit in the case of both just normally exiting and for fire escape means too. Materials going with concrete, steel, glulam, and polycarbonate. It was a lot of talk between me and my tutor about using ETFE, but because of the kind of the cushions that the material kind of produces, but the materials, the bubbles of ETFE just would not fit within the fragility and delicate kind of aesthetic that I'm going for. So we move on to now with the site plan. We can see kind of the scheme in its location in the Venice Lagoon. Moving on to the plan, and I wanted to create kind of an interior volume plan cut at different levels. So I call it a multi-level bisect. That although we've got different levels going on, I just wanted to kind of show the different levels within each of the volumes in one plan to see the whole scheme in its entirety, including the landscape engineering side of it. So we've got the lobby, we've got the bridge, then we've got the lobby, the cafe space, the museum, the auditorium, the fish farmer settlements, the fish ladder, the weirs, and the sediment pools. I move on to section AA, which is the short section. We can see the auditorium, and we can see part of one of the fish farm settlements too. And I was really happy with this one because you can also see the fish ladder, one of the weirs, and the bottom of the sediment pools too. Kind of those sediments that you can see, those 3. I didn't know the 3. Yeah, those that you can see kind of the buildup of sediment in those pools, and the fish are jumping as well in the weirs, and the beautiful backdrop of the mountains in the background. And the long section now showing much more of the landscape. We can see the process of the riffle beds, the environmental, the landscape engineering going on, the foundations of the building. Let me just double check. Yeah, you can see the foundations, the brass one too. Oh my god, the wrapping of the envelope. You can also see that in its entirety, and I think that's what also makes this project so beautiful. Is that it's at different levels that people are experiencing, even when they're outside, when they're on the ground slab walking around. They can see all of these different layers of the building, and it's the same process of all the different levels and all the different processes that the water has to go through to be filtered, and bringing in the sediment, bringing in the fresh water. And I think just all of it, the architecture and the landscape, truly just works in harmony. The north elevation, I'm really happy with how the short elevations came together. Well, all the elevations, to be honest, but in particular the short elevations such as this one. The north elevation, we can see the east elevation. We can also see kind of the scheme in its entirety, and the south elevation too. We can see from the south the bridge, the entrance, and the different levels that people can be entering. The wrapping of the envelope. We can also see the structural elements of how the envelope is actually attached to the structural support elements and the concrete blocks too, and how people will be experiencing this in terms of scale. And the west elevation too. This overlooking the lagoon, so we won't be able to see kind of anything on that side, but kind of creating this atmosphere of this kind of foggy experience. I think it works quite nicely, this aesthetic. Now moving on to kind of the final bits, which is like the health and safety for regulations, travel escape distances, sorry. Looking at the approved document B and the multi-user experience kind of diagrams I created. Environmental strategies and sustainability, so solar testing, explaining the reasons for the PV cells and how some elements of the scheme of the envelope will be actually covered in this thin film PV cell that will be generating electricity for the scheme. The landscape, explaining again the fish, the sediment pools and the weirs, the ventilation, some cross ventilation happening, and of course the water collection system that will also be happening at some of the envelopes coming in, so bringing in that rainwater, and then it can be then reused for obviously a couple of different purposes, except for obviously washing and cleaning. The choice of materials, and then a small kind of statement as to kind of the smart proposals that I'm going to be introducing to the scheme as well. The technical and structural principles, creating a structural axonometric of the different stages and the different parts of the scheme. The facade details, again referencing back to Gary's LV foundation and the structural details and envelope facade details of my own project. The landscape engineering, going back to those same three elements, and then showing this illustration of the sediment influx process of how this buildup is then used to then diggers come and then they dredge the sediment, which can then be reused in other parts of the lagoon. Referencing quickly the Parc de la Villette by Bernard Schumi, and not so much the project itself, but the way that the project has been represented in the drawings. And that is something that I think architecture students aren't so highly exposed to. Yes, projects and the outcomes of those projects, but mainly how are they being represented, and how can you use representation styles for your own project despite kind of the theme of the project being something completely different. And I think that's quite amazing, to be honest, about how an architect and how designers as a whole can use another artist's work, not necessarily in relation to what they're trying to achieve, but in how they're trying to represent it and how they want to communicate that to an audience. So I just wanted to include that as like a reference as well. And now we're moving on to my favorite part of the project, and my tutor constantly goes on about how I love to just spend lots of time doing these drawings. But this year I literally did not spend that much time doing these drawings, because a lot of my time and focus was placed on the architecture, on the engineering, the landscape engineering, and oh my god, Rhino and the grasshopper was just playing up this year, so that was a lot of my time and focus. So the aerial atmospherics start off with the first one, the hydrocultural center of the Piave, showing an overview of the project. The wide view aerial perspective that we can kind of see many people kind of experiencing the scheme, and the fish ladder and the weirs coming in. I think it looks quite nice because of, again, that fog, the atmosphere that I've been able to kind of create in this process. Another aerial perspective that we can kind of see, like as people entering from the alternative route through the other ramp bridge, kind of coming down towards the ground slab. Aerial perspective, the view from the fish farm settlement. Again, I think it's kind of just been constructed in a way that provides the optimal experience for all users of the space, whether you're a visitor, whether you're a fish farmer resident, or whether you're a resident of Venice coming to check it out. Upon arrival, I really did like this perspective, because it provides a greater understanding of what it's like to actually experience the scheme as soon as you arrive at the very front, at the beginning, and like it's kind of like the start of your journey in a way with the project. Aerial perspective again, kind of showing alternative view, the fish ladder showing the fishes kind of jumping up through the process. Bit of the lagoon in the background, and again bringing in that atmosphere to truly just show off how delicate and fragile this scheme is with its environment. Yeah, I called it the fish, not technically a fish eye view, but I wanted to kind of bring it much more smaller scale, much more close up of how kind of the users will be experiencing these spaces, and kind of the scale of these spaces too, because from a plan drawing, from a site plan drawing, they seem quite small, but as you come up quite closer, you actually see how effectively bigger these spaces are in terms of human scale. Observing the Venice Lagoon, so there are one or two people we can see on the not really balconies, but on the mine's gone blank, but on the extended spaces on the exterior, which is still attached to the forms of the concrete blocks. and kind of the amazing view that they're going to have, looking at this whole process of the water coming in, filtering it away, and kind of releasing that sediment, and we can see the buildup of the sediment, all of these factors working in cohesion with one another. And I wanted to finish off this project with the final slide called the true impact. And what I meant by this was, I wanted to kind of divide the collage into two sides, one being 2023, which is this year, and one being 21-23. And we can see that, I'm just going to say kind of the final statement that I made is, when it's all said and done, we will be remembered by the actions we took as architects in how we were able to combat social and environmental issues. It's time to turn the tide. And we can see that, but if we don't take the actions, both architecturally, both environmentally and socially, then we will see the rise in sea levels, we will see weather conditions getting worse, we will see stronger winds, much more stronger and harsher rainfall as well, and how this is going to be impacting the spaces that we live in right now. And it's time to kind of open our eyes much more into the fact that there's schemes out there right now that we can see aren't working. There's projects that are happening right now in design practices that just aren't going to be beneficial for the future of the environment, and we need to take a stand, and we need to truly understand kind of the repercussions of the work that we do right now. So with that, I mean, this is like the 40-sheet kind of summary of my final year project. I've got my design diary, of course, and the 2 posters, which I'll probably put pictures of them in the community, and you can also check them out on Instagram, on my Instagram. But apart from that, it's quite strange that the year's finished, uni's finished, the masters is complete, and yeah, right now it's just applying for jobs, chilling out for a bit, of course, but applying for jobs and seeing what the next steps are. So thank you so much for watching, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, everyone.